All right, thank you very much. So I want to say a tiny little bit about the handout. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very excited about it. The handout, when I went on, when we got the first thing, I looked at my handout, had a strange title. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It turns out that the deadline for getting the handout in was about the same time as I was doing the APTI conference. And if you happen to have downloaded that handout, that's not that's not the handout. So go download it again when you want to. And it does still have the same title because it was a last minute thing. And I'm just so pleased that the conference organizer are agile enough to put that up when I noticed it yesterday or the day before, whatever it was. So there's that. All right, now let me see. That earlier handout actually was about, if you read it, really, I've been around, I got my feet wet in my master's degree studying with David Kersey in a psychopathology class. And then I joined the first APTI sessions, and that started in about 1980. So I'm a really old timer. We forget about the old part, but I've been around a long time, and so things have emerged a lot. And I think my middle name is redesigned, so I do that a lot. So we'll just see how that goes. I have a lot of slides, a lot of content I want to share. I'm not sure why Catherine let me do this. I did say I want to present all three lenses. So, but anyway, I'll just do a little bit of framing for you with it. So, okay. So, well, here we are. And I hopefully will move the shadow away from the window and you'll get clearer on some things you may already know about type. And this was about stress. So I'm sure that you may have some thoughts about stress. And I thought maybe you could do me a favor and think of something you're stressed about. Don't stay there very long. Just get something in mind to think about as we go through the session. And then we'll refer back to it. I don't write a book or anything, but just get something down. Well, that's long enough. I'll just stress you a little bit more. I'm sure things will come along as we go along. So what is in this deep, dark thing of stress? I'll give you a little framework first. We're going to look at 3 different lenses, and these are the icons we use for those lenses. The last one you will not have seen probably, though I have presented it for a while. And so here's some kind of points about stress. So we are self-organizing systems. We're living systems and we are self-organizing, meaning that in the beginning, there are patterns of organization so that we grow in certain ways. And so we're an organizing system or an energy field or however you want to think about it, but there is a pattern of organization. Part of this understanding of living systems is that we're self-organizing and we're self-maintaining. So we're wired to do things that are going to maintain that pattern. Tells me the type speaks to this so much because in the beginning, you can watch babies and they will be doing things that go with what their pattern is, right? There's research on that. So, okay, so we've got that. So we're going to do things. So that's why it relates to stress. The other piece is that living systems are self-renewing. So they are quite likely to do things that will renew their energy. And there's some things that happen when we try to do that. Oftentimes the things we try actually don't work to renew ourselves. Like the snack bar I had for breakfast probably would have taken my energy down a little if I weren't already so hyper today. So followed by a nice big cup of decaf coffee with caffeine in it. Okay, so, but there are things that what happens with stress is that this self-renewing process and the self-maintaining process kind of get jumbled up, and we do things that wind up being self-destructive. They wind up not working. And we are also self-transcending, hence the transformation part of this. So hopefully this understanding will help you. You've many times heard my pronouncements, sermons, soapboxes about patterns if you've been around me for a while. We have to remember that living systems are in patterns. They are not processes. So I'm not an introverted thinker. I'm not even an introverted thinker type, because I'm so much more than that. And you are all the same. So but patterns can help us in a lot of ways, and processes help us as well. So in my view, the processes are there to help maintain the pattern. They're also there to help us grow. So processes, activities, however you want to call them, patterns can inform us about our stressors. That's what our topic is today. And patterns can lead to rigidity as we turn up the volume on our natural inclinations to try to deal with those stressors, or it can lead to growth. So how are we going to get it to lead to growth? I don't know. Let me see what I wrote. Oh, okay. So the key here is self-management. And self-management is self-leadership. It's that it all starts with you. And the more self-aware you become, the better off you'll be. So we use these different lenses to help us do that self-management. One is Essential Motivators, which tells us why we do what we do. You may know that lens by Temperament. I changed the names and we changed the label of it because it got confused with the temperament of dogs, or the temperament, the other lenses, and a general meaning of temperament. So another lens that we use is interaction style. So there are 4 essential motivator patterns, 4 interaction style patterns. And I notice in somebody's handout that they were referencing that. Catherine has a session on interaction styles later. Cognitive dynamics is the name that we've given to the 8 function model. It isn't, that isn't the pattern, but the pattern is whole type. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. And then we have a new lens that's been around for a while, which is intentional drivers. And we've called it intentional styles. We've called it cognitive styles, but we finally settled and we're not going to change the name again, probably. As I said, my middle name's redesign. Okay, so all of this involves a recognition that self-management is a journey, not destination. It doesn't stop. You keep going. And the key to that is self-awareness. And that's, I think, the gift that we give to the world and to ourselves, is that we have an increase. Once you know your type patterns and the processes involved in those, you now have way more self-awareness. And that's a key thing in development. It's one of the things that we have to do to self-manage. Okay, so whole type. Yes, there are 16 patterns. There are probably 32. I haven't tried to name those, but Dario and I took a stab at naming these patterns. And in the current engagement I have with the World Wildlife Fund in Australia, we're just using essential motivators. So I just told them to ignore the type code. And they're coming back to me and saying, well, I related to the analyzer operator. And then sometimes a couple people know the type code and they kept apologizing for using the type code because I told them to ignore it. I just didn't want them to get confused. It wasn't a bad thing. But anyway, I thought that was really interesting how the themes really spoke to them. So we're not going to look at whole type today, and we're not going to look at cognitive dynamics. We're just going to look at these other 3 lenses. So each lens gives us different information. And there are lenses that don't, well, all the lenses in the world about personality differences will give you different information. like the Enneagram. It gives us really different information, and it doesn't line up with type. You can't get 16 type patterns to fit into those 9 things. It's a 3-based system as opposed to a 2-based system, someone told me, who did software development. Okay, so we're going to look at what kind of information does it give us and what does it tell us about stress. So here we have, all of these meet at that level of the 16 personality types. And the new one is this intentional drivers. And each lens tells us different things. So how we do what we do, why we do what we do, what we do. It's not so much what we do, but what we think about. And then what our aim is when we're doing that thinking. So intentional drivers was created out of an attempt to get a laminated card like these that we've given out for years, where you could have 4 on it, and when Chris Montoya worked on it, that's what he wound up with, was 4 patterns. So we'll talk about those. The book's not out yet, sorry, but we will be launching a course. Okay, so first we're going to think about the essential motivator pattern, and I'd just like to give you these graphics to get a sense of the pattern, because this tells us what aspects of the pattern are at the root of the stress. And in this case, it's the core needs. When our core needs are not getting met, we have this deep psychological stress. And the talents are there to scratch the itch to create the stress. So if we're doing work, for example, that doesn't use our talents, and we don't find another way to do that in our lives, then we may have that even as the cause of stress, because we don't get that opportunity to do what will help us meet the needs best. Okay, so here are the type codes. Most of you know these, I'm sure. I don't refer to these as SPs, SJs, NTs, NFs anymore, but I thought you would need to know that. Improviser, stabilizer, theorist, and catalyst. Okay, so I'm going to take you through each one of these. Oops, oh, wait a minute. This is the ugliest handout you've ever seen, visual. Don't read it, please. That is the handout. Okay, when the handout didn't get up there, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to put it up there. So I did. And I just had to find some use for it. I got a lot of advice from my colleagues and friends who said, no, don't show that. But one told me, Carol told me, well, you put it up there, but just tell them it's awful and don't read it. So there we go. So you don't need to take a lot of notes, because it's in the handout. Okay, there's one of these for each lens. So here's the thing for improviser. So as we go through, I want you to think about, is this your source of stress? And to me, this lens is the one that helps me the most to work at my stress. So the improviser pattern, the core need, the psychological need, is the freedom to act now. And I was given that gift from one of my colleagues who has ESFP preferences, and that's how she started describing the core needs, and I thought it was very helpful. And to have an impact. So in the autobiographies I ask my clients to do, one person in this recent engagement sent me only 1.25 pages. Sometimes I get 4 pages, sometimes I get 20 answering these questions. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And it was all about his achievements. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be awful. He's arrogant. He was the most delightful guy. I had such a nice long set talk with him. And so he wasn't arrogant at all. It was just that the improviser pattern was what his drive was, to have an impact. And so when I ask about him, that's what he described were the impacts he had had. Okay, so very important for people to do that. Now, what are they stressed by? Well, constrained, so they don't have the freedom. Boredom is also a bit of a stressor, and the lack of impact. So a lot of things, you could go into detail about that, but it's a lot, things that are too long-term, where they're not seeing any results, things like that. The stress response. Now, this is the thing. the things that we try to do naturally for the stress response is to try to create that excitement, to create that impact. So striking back, and it can be very simple things, you know, like, I don't know, arguing with somebody or yanking their chain in such a way, or becoming reckless. So now we're talking a little bit more severe stress, because this is what I got in the class from David Kersey. I won't even talk about when it goes farther off the rails. So if you think that these are your stressors, then this is something you're going to want to know. And this is in the handout. So the antidote is to find new exciting activities with freedom to act and options for new impacts. So if you have an improviser pattern and you're stressed, not severely stressed so that it's totally unconscious, but you now know about these patterns, so you can say, am I an improviser stress? Right? So that's the question to ask. Does this fit you? And think about that for a minute, only a minute, because we have 3 more patterns to take a look at. So the stabilizer pattern has a need to, now we put belonging in there, but it's really about membership and having a place to contribute and responsibility. So there's this hunger for responsibility, taking on more and more and more and more responsibility. And you know what happens when that happens. You get overloaded, and we'll see what the stress response here is. So this is what the stabilizer needs. Well, what are they stressed by? Irresponsibility in themselves or others, instability, because then, you know, that leads to problems, and inability to contribute. And their response is they tend to complain. These are the lighter weight responses: get sick, tired, sorry, and worried. Of course, if you're taking on all the burden of responsibility from everybody, or everything just has to be done, and I know we can all do this, we can all get in stabilizer stress, whether that's our pattern or not, you know, you get tired. You start to worry about things. And we all can worry too, I'm sure. So I think COVID and the recent environment has to do, you know, it will trigger a lot of worry in a lot of us for a variety of reasons. So it isn't always just the stabilizer that has a corner on worry. So what do? So if you have a stabilizer pattern, then some things that you can do and things that people can do to help you too is appreciate, you know, get some appreciation and be included in news and activities. So sometimes if this is your pattern and you're not getting that, then you have to ask for it. You have to seek it out. And if you are working with someone who has a stabilizer pattern, or living with, or in a relationship with, remember that they need some appreciation, because often the logistics that they're so good at get taken for granted, and they don't get the appreciation that they really need to keep on going. And then finding new membership. So finding some new group will often help as well. Because if you don't have if you're working in a job that has lots and lots of independence, work, you're just doing your software development coding stuff, but you have a stabilizer pattern. If you don't have you're not getting fed there, because there's no, especially remotely, no way to have lots of camaraderie and connection while you're doing that, then you may just need to recognize that you need to find another source for that during that stressful time. Doesn't mean to quit the job, just recognize it yourself. So is this you? Is this the kind of stress you're under? All right, so the theorist pattern. So the theorist has this core psychological need, a never-ending thirst for knowledge and competence and mastery. And that may be mastery over a topic or mastery over the work, that ties in, but it's also self-mastery. So they can be very hard on themselves when they're not mastering themselves. I'll share a personal example of that in a minute. So they get stressed by powerlessness because they can't actually seem to get what they want, and incompetence, not only in themselves, but in others. And they get stressed by having a lack of knowledge. Hence, my husband and I both have INTP preferences. We watch the news a lot. We want to keep up about all of that, even though it's detrimental. And my daughter says don't. But she's smarter than I am, by the way. And what they can do is obsess. All of the kind of boring obsessions get fixated on something, and then they do things that make them mindless, like, I don't know, forgetting things. Word finding problems actually is a symptom of theorist stress. So one of the things, just to give you a little example, is, I was really great. 2017, I've been doing trainings online already. So COVID comes along, nothing changed that way. So I wasn't so stressed by the work part. In fact, it was great. We had people wanting to have a sense of community. So our courses changed. Well, now things have changed. Now we have all of these other tools that I don't now master. And I sign up for all these things I'm going to watch to get them, and I keep obsessing about it. And then I lose my focus when I am teaching sometimes. Oh, I shouldn't have admitted that, but that happens. Okay, so what can we do about it? Well, first of all, find a way to reconfirm your competence. Go do, if this is your pattern, go do something that you know you can do well. And recognize how much you do know. And for people around you, this, if you are working in a relationship with someone with a theorist pattern, this is something you can contribute to them. And sometimes taking on a new project, like for me, that might be designing a new course. The challenge is if you take on too many new projects, you're back to feeling incompetent again, a little bit of a circle. Okay, so is this you? Is this the kind of stress you're facing and the kinds of symptoms of it? Okay, now we have the catalyst pattern. What's the need? Deep meaning and significance. Having a sense that what you're doing is contributing to some cause or some purpose bigger than yourself. That can be as simple as parenting. It can be as complex as, managing, starting a major change effort of some kind. And having a sense of unique identity, that you are unique, that you recognizing that and having that sense. And one of the things that we're finding a lot of, and we all have these needs, by the way, to some degree, we're finding a lot of people showing up for our certification trainings who've gone around to lots of experts and gotten input on the 8 functions, and they still can't figure out what fits them. And then not only that, when we go to work on that in the courses, it turns out that many, and in the one-on-ones, this usually becomes a bit evident to me, and that is that they weren't allowed to be them. And that's one reason why helping people find their best fit type is so powerful, because of that. And so this is the catalyst need that we all have to some degree. And I think finally, this notion of purpose-driven organizations and finding purpose is coming to the fore in a broader way. So I say that's great. So when you're stressed, if this is your pattern, and you're most often stressed when there's insincerity or betrayal. And this question came up in a discussion group, and now I've forgotten the answer that that he came up with. But it was the sense that when somebody didn't show up for an appointment, they betrayed them. It felt like betrayal. And it was like, well, why? What was behind that? And I think it had a lot to do that that there was a sense of integrity, and that somehow or other it was violating to him and the authentic relationship that he so valued. So in some way, Stephanie might post in chat what the real answer was, because I can't remember exactly. The stress response is to dissociate and become phony and fake. So disassociate means that you separate yourself from the situation and then send the phony self out. And sometimes people with the catalyst pattern are really, really good at that. All of us do it sometimes when we have to go to some kind of function we don't want to, and we put on the kind of face that's going to work there. Okay, so this is the stress response. Well, and the, whoops, hang on, what did I do? Okay, so these things lose, so what these mean is that you've lost the identity if you have to be phony all the time. And the stress antidote then is that Linda didn't fill in the blanks on this one because I did a cut and paste. That's the theorist one. Oh my gosh. So, and I don't even have the handout I printed out. Ah, okay.
Handout, Linda.
Huh?
I have
You have it?
handout. Shall I read it?
Can you read what the catalyst stress antidote is?
Affirmation and nurturing from self and others, and new sources of meaning.
All right. So thank you very much. I'm going to get off of this slide. So, okay. So stress. Okay, the time is, what time is it? 11:01. Okay, so I think we have time to do about a 6-minute breakout and get you to share your thoughts. And then we'll come back and see if you have questions, or if we can pull a few insights, but just so you get to kind of share with the person that you're in the breakout with. So about 6 minutes. So what we're going to have you do is just type in chat some, because we still have a fair amount of content. So type in chat, and I'll be watching the chat, and we'll see if there's some things that, insights, response. Even if you say this is a crock, I don't know what she's talking about. I'll try to ignore that chat if that's the case. But yeah, so just whatever. Okay, recognizing the patterns, same stressors. Yes, what happens? That's fun. Anything else in chat? Yeah, appreciation does seem important. And I think for stabilizers, they just don't get it very often because it's invisible almost what people with that pattern do. A little in all, but with catalyst and embodied response. Yes, that's how you know when it's going to work, is when it hits you in the gut. Yeah, it does. It activates that, the wiring. Oh, wow. That oldest fear. And betrayal. That is a big one. And you get overwhelmed dealing with issues, yes. Now, yes. Oh, yes, Catherine. Incompetent with tech, yeah. Integrity is significant. Well, it's interesting because integrity, okay, I got to skip models a minute I think integrity has a lot to do with introverted feeling. So we might all get triggered by that one because it's there somewhere in our stack, as some of the people say. Okay, any big questions come up? Raise your hand if there are. That was a yes/no question, of course. Okay, so I'm going to move into the next lens. And Catherine Stothard is doing a session on this lens, so you can get more detail with that. So this is the interaction style pattern. It's about this drive and core belief and an aim that you're aiming for. And we have different energy patterns when we do that. So, and we have talents, and then we have appearances on the front. So that's what people will see. This is an easy, quick lens for people to get a hold of. And so anyway, and the type codes, if you're not familiar with them, I can't put it into 2 letters because it just goes with all 4 almost. But well, there's an extroverted version and an introvert. No. So anyway, so you can take a look at the type codes there. Okay, so now you got a fix on it if you hadn't seen it before. This is a match of pattern. Whenever we have a new lens that emerges, that's me and my colleagues, it's really about, do the patterns match? Like I said, Enneagram patterns don't match. Some of them are seductively similar, like the 5 and the INTP, for example. So, and that's all I know about Enneagram. Okay, so let's take a look then at, oops, I got to show you the slide because it's huge. There we go. You can reference all of that. So this is just real, I'm going to click through quickly with this one because this one is a little easier sometimes to spot what the stressor is. So, and these antidotes are given mostly in the frame of what you can do to help someone else, but it's really stressful for someone with a chart the course who can't anticipate. And I know that for those of you who have this pattern, I most likely have stressed you already because I didn't really give you much of a roadmap. So I ask for forgiveness for that. It's really, there's a focused energy so you can see it. If people do the walk, we can do all kinds of physical things with it we can't do on Zoom. And it's really about, even if you have surprisingly ISTP patterns, which you would think wouldn't want this necessarily by the stereotypes of SP, they want to know these things. So just keep that in mind as you go through. All right, so now the get things going is an engaging energy. So there's a lot of openness and engagement in the way they behave and the way they move. And so this wanting to involve and be involved and get an embraced result, that's what they're after, is that people have agreed to some degree that they've had input. So this is one of those that, by the stereotypes that go with stabilizer, people tend to think that belongingness and this wanting to be a part of what's going on is stabilizer, but it is also ENTP and ESFP and ENFP. So those patterns, as well as ESFJ. So just a little thing to be aware as you think about these patterns. So what happens is to help, to talk things out and have active participation. They chart the course, stress and get things going. They want opposite things, really. Leave me alone so I can think about it, or figure out what to do. Let's talk about it. So it's not just extroversion; it has a different quality than the extroversion has a different quality than the get things going style. Okay, so behind the scenes, this energy is kind of a laid back, open energy. That's and that drive is to integrate all kinds of information, interactions to get that best result possible. And so now this isn't a funny one, not enough input or credit. This is my pattern. So I often get embarrassed when I get credit, but if it goes on too long and someone else claims the credit, then that's really stressful to me. So press those. So these are some things. These stress responses go with the fight, flight, freeze, flurry. So we have noticed that that's kind of a shift in the energy when they're under stress. And then there are some different kinds of things you can do about that. The antidote, be patient with getting information, giving information, getting information. Ask for what you need. Don't just be quiet if this is your pattern. And take the time to reflect and integrate. Okay, in charge. Well, this is the problem with this name. It's a very determined energy. It's not a role. And people who have this pattern don't necessarily have to be in charge. They just have to have things getting done. Okay. So the strive to accomplish, get an achievable result, and this determined energy, and you can see it in the walk. It's so beautiful to walk that. The stressors are when they feel out of control or nothing's being accomplished. Notice that it's not about you're not accomplishing anything or I'm not accomplishing anything. It's just in general. And that stress response is to fight or push against. That's what we mean by fight. And then when it gets too far, the third one is what they do when it's more severe, resentfully check out. That's the true rubric for all of them. So the antidote is seeing the stressors, reasons for delay, like explain things to themselves or seek them out. And humor often helps. So I find that kind of interesting that seems to help people with this pattern. So now you've had a look at these 4 patterns in this blitz of going through. As you think about it, maybe you can type in chat if you recognize this as a stressor for you. I have to look at my phone. Okay. Any thoughts? Anything coming up in chat? Okay, good, helpful. Yes, lack of progress, that's right. So chart the course as a pattern that likes to see progress. Yeah, I'm not getting credit. I worked with somebody who, I was her intern, and we were school psychologists, and in the meetings, I might tell her something, that's some idea I had, and then she would bring it up. And it really did bother me a lot. I didn't do anything about it. I have to admit that. Okay, yes. Oh, Catherine. Maybe that's one reason I like to put my slide decks off to the last minute, because I work too hard at getting them. Okay, so we've seen a few things. So the key here is that if you are stressed, you may not know why you're stressed. So these are questions that you can start to ask yourself. Is this a reason? Is this a reason? All right. So take a deep breath. Now we're going to go into something different. For some of you may have seen this. I've done presentations on it before, but here we go. This is only part of the handout. This is like half, less than half of the handout. So I just modified it so that I could make it. So there are more things in there, but the key things that we're looking at here are, what are the drivers of our intentions? So this is one way to look at 4 patterns with the interaction style, with the cognitive dynamics lens in mind. And I find it extremely helpful when people are in conflict or when people are having trouble sorting. So I often use it in the background to suggest a different pattern for them to look at. I don't share it with people when I do that. I would just say, well, you know what, why don't you take a look at, I don't know, ISFP and INFP. They're sorting between those 2. And they're very different intentional drivers for those 2 patterns. And different essential motivators as well. Okay, so what this is there's in the back of the brain. Now, this is not brain research, so this is metaphorically speaking, in the back of our mind, that back of mind thing. There's some kind of a quest or an intention that we want. And we want that in relationship to some kind of outcome. So we have that intention, There's an outcome then that's going to pull us toward it. And we have a rationale of what we're looking for. So these are the bare bones of the pattern. By the way, these are essential qualities of patterns. If you want to understand patterns, it's not just a random group of traits. To explain the pattern and understand it, you have to look at what are the essential qualities. So when I put these up here, these are categories of essential qualities. Little lesson in systems theory. Okay, so you have a rationale and you filter for certain kinds of information, and you have a particular talent that goes with it. Everything has a talent, right? I just think the universe has made it so that we have needs, drives, etc., and then we're given a gift of talents to help us get it met. So when Chris Montoya started working with this, he had little phrases from our 40 per type, 40 interviews per type, so times 16. And he took the complete sentences and did a card sort with them. I have the box of cards. And then he discovered they were in these patterns. So, okay, so here are the type patterns that go with it. So enhancing is those with an SFJ and an NTP pattern tend to always want to make things better. So just a week or so ago, I was having a conversation with Stephanie, who is in the background with me, helps with the training. A lot of times it's more than breakouts and mechanical stuff. It's a lot of times that she sends me texts and whatever. But we were talking about, why am I feeling so clumsy in this? And I realized that I've had these lesson plans and agendas since 2017. And I just think there's a better way. I think I should improve it. So I'm going to improve the next one, the cognitive dynamics one that's coming up, because I always thought it was, oh, I feel so incompetent, but it wasn't. It was just that I couldn't get the time and the focus and the realization of how to make something better. Okay. So that's how that works for me. So authenticating. I'm not going to give you that picture. I just wanted to get the sense of what authenticating is about. So authenticating, it's like a fingerprint, and knowing that something is true to what it is. When in the old days, when I entered the type community, back in 80 and 81, there were things like, well, why did David Kersey rearrange the type table? Why did? And I felt a lot of resistance to temperament. And I finally understood it when I understood this, because the modal preferences were NFP, and that's the type pattern that goes with authenticating. So I was veering from the authentic Isabel Myers interpretation of Jung into some other land. So that was troubling a bit, but it helped me when I got to this lens to see, oh, okay, that's all they were doing, instead of they were being mean and evil. Okay, it's sort of like the cat, just checking, right? So a lot of times it's checking for accuracy. A lot of times it's relating to authenticity in the catalyst way, or to what's supposed to be done in the STJ way. So here's the slide. The core intention is this quest to authenticate and having honored agreements and finding out, and finding what's valued. So what's important. You can see how that relates to introverted feelings so well. And as we know, STJ in the BB model has an inner introverted feeling operating there right at the top. And these agreements could be more the extroverted thinking part of it. So outcomes and the rationale, what they're looking for are validated outcomes. Has this been proven? Has this been checked? And morality, like against what values, and agreements. Does this go with our agreements? Okay, so validated outcomes, morality, and agreements. This is what they're looking for. Now, what happens when people with this pattern don't get it? Well, we have the stressors. The lack of integrity in honoring agreements. So it isn't just the NFJ pattern or the catalyst that might not like integrity. It's also the NFP and the STJ. It's this kind of integrity. And just simply put, others aren't doing what's right. They're not doing the right thing. And what happens when this stress response happens is there's a tendency to embellish, I want to say heighten stories. You know how when you tell a story, you can just simply state the facts. And when you tell another story, you can tell it with emotion, maybe add a few little things here. But it becomes like a big focus and about what's not being done ethically or right. And this is true for all of us, I think. When we feel like something isn't being done and it's not right, it's not ethical, we tell the stories. Those are the stories we choose to tell. Oh, I saw this and noted and so on. So that's a stress response. And amplifying problems, really bringing attention to problems that other people might not see. And then finding fault and blaming is some of what happens. Oh, what do we do about those things? Well, if you're in relationship with someone, or you find yourself veering off this for yourself, uphold the consequences and make new arrangements, or maybe that should be new agreements, whatever it is. Just starting something new so that you can rectify the problem. That can be helpful. Okay, so you might identify authenticating in yourself, and that might have been something to do with the stress, like my story. So customizing. The perfect metaphor is the tailor, where they're customizing it to fit. So people who have a customizing pattern tend to want to adjust things and make them fit. And of course, it could be simply like, where do you want to go? What's the best way to get there? Adjusting the pathway to accommodate. So with this pattern, the core intention is this quest. It's a quest to customize. So it's painful, actually, to be told, and I think I found this in people I've trained, to be told, here's how you have to do it. Because, how you have to do it doesn't work for XYZ client. And I did have a bit of, this really helped me get over a little bit of anger that I had towards somebody that I thought was sort of using my stuff without giving me credit, my button from the Essential Motivators piece. But I realized that what this person was doing was customizing it and tailoring it to the environments. And actually, I looked at it, I was getting credit, but there was just, I didn't have control over it. So, and then the rationale is the differentiated outcome. So the outcome is going to be slightly different. And what they want in an outcome in a relationship is mutuality and reciprocity. I know somebody who founded a company who left the company because there was no reciprocity with the co-founder. The co-founder stepped into the CEO role and really held the role, and that just didn't work for him. The stressors is this lack of reciprocity, like I said, and not being allowed to meet the needs and the goals, to adjust those. And the stress response is angry, getting impatient, become cynical, and incisively sarcastic. You know what incisiveness is, it just cuts through, right? So, and pointing out gaps and complaining often can happen with this if they're not allowed to do that. And this is based on things that were said in these interviews that Chris Montoya captured. The stress antidotes, if this is your pattern, then you can take a step away to try to look at what are the current dynamics and kind of recalibrate to that. Or you can find another approach to projects. Now that you have this knowledge, you could also say, if this is your pattern, you could also talk to someone else and say, look, here's what I think really needs to happen. This course, this workshop or whatever needs to be done this way because these people have limited capacity to sit for very long, or they have limited resources, or we're using a different medium. So I find it interesting that Susan Nash's session, I didn't get to go to, but I looked at the handout and it was really all of these things that you could customize to your situation. Perfect example. Okay, so that may fit you. Let's look at another pattern. It's called orchestrating. And it's like the conductor is orchestrating all of these different instruments to come in at a certain time. If you think about orchestrating in terms of writing the orchestration for a piece of music, it's a way to give it some individuality and to work for a certain setting, like for a movie as opposed to listening in a concert. Got them all lined up and ready to go. That's sort of kind of what happens when someone is orchestrating. It's getting all these things lined up. They're such cute dogs anyway. So, and of course there's more, but that's in the handout. So the drivers are this quest to orchestrate and to maximize the resources and to just find what's workable. Not so much what's needed or what's supposed to happen, but what's workable, what's going to work. And then they'll be looking to see, is this going to produce an outcome? So the story I told you about the improviser who wrote just a very short amount, and it turned out it was about the impact stuff. His pattern, I'm pretty sure, is the SFP pattern that goes with this pattern. And it was really about, key to him was that he produced outcomes. And of course, that feeds the impact as well. And then, can they take action on it? Can we get results? SFP, as well as NTJ, looks a bit different, but forget the JP, forget the TF. Things just happen slightly differently, but this is the pattern. Okay, so the stressors then is if they're not shown respect. I have a lot of time. So stressors not being shown respect, being blocked from acting, or being micromanaged. You see, if you don't get respect, that's not like an ego trip. We all have some of that. But it's about if you're not being respected, you're going to have trouble getting the results you want, or getting the results that are needed, whatever the case may be. And being blocked from acting or being micromanaged. Now, I will tell you, every one of the people I've interviewed for this thing, when I've asked about the problem, sometimes it's about, not every one of them, but a lot of them was about, well, there's so many processes we have to adhere to. And so I don't get to act. I haven't checked that against which type preferences they have, because I haven't heard their confirmations yet. So those are the stressors. The responses is getting frustrated, checking out, or lashing out. Well, I think we had lashing out for improviser. But I've seen it happen in NTJ as well. And then becoming exhausted, trying to make things work. And then sort of, have indifference. It's just a job. I have to do this. This just needs to be done. I have to do this. And then not to worry so much about the accuracy of something. And I think I've seen that happen in NTJ preference folk as well as this SFP preference folk. Okay, so what can help is finding new experiences and new ways to be self-directed. So if you're in a situation where the orchestration isn't being well done, it isn't that you have to do it yourself, but if it's not being well done, not getting results, then you can leave. Happened with a business partner of mine, I think. See new ways to be self-directed. So finding avenues, negotiating for more freedom to to take charge of a project or something like that. All right. We have one more, I think. Oh, yeah. Enhancing. So here's the guy at the computer, or the gal, I guess it is, at the computer, and finding out how to make things better, little tweaks. So to the degree that we have many people with doing software development that have NTP preferences, that kind of relates. Let's fix it a little bit better. And this is a more tangible thing. I think you forgot something. I brought your boots and umbrella. It's going to make that outing a bit of a nice experience. Had a hard time finding some of these pictures. Okay, so here's what this enhancing is like. And this was my stress, that I couldn't enhance this. I couldn't, but I hadn't, and it needed to be done. So that's what was going on with me. So the quest is to make it better, always working towards quality and what is best. So the worst thing that's happened now to me is we got this book, right? Because we just made a few tweaks. It's the Introduction to Temperament book with a different language in it. Now, as things are going on, I discover, oh no, that description has bias. It needs to be redone. So now I need to redo that book and come out with 5.0 instead of 4.0. Well, that happens. Okay. So the rationale is that the outcomes are actually better than what you had before, refined, and that you continue to maintain accuracy and wholeness. And this is true for SFJ as much as it is for NTP. Those of you with SFJ preferences, maybe you'll find better words than I'm using, but always room for improvement. The book's not really even started yet, so we got lots of time. The stressors, then the lack of alignment with information. So I have many people who contacted me, feels like many, who want to tweak the models that we've developed. And it just doesn't work, and I get so frustrated. And then if I can't get others to improve things, well, then that's a problem. So that's why I take it on myself if it needs it, or I leave. Stress responses, avoid dealing directly with the stressor. So they maybe just want to ignore it and let it sit for a while. I think that's what I've been doing with some of my courses. I just realized how long standing I've had that thing. And I will admit the courses still work. Probably someone would say, Linda, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But, oh, I could do this and whatever. So, okay. Then the response then too is to become, self-critical and dwell on it. And this is true for SFJ and NTP. And I'm seeing that bear out in the interviews I do with people. And discouraged, so then become drained emotionally. So that's actually what was happening with me. I was blaming COVID. I think it's still worth blaming COVID, but that just adds one more stressor and stuff like that. So, all right, now what can you do to help? Well, remove the situational objections. Well, in my case, I have to remove the situational objections for myself. That's logistically challenging, and that's not my talent. So I'll have to bite the bullet and make some changes. And directly address divergent perspectives. So when you're trying to enhance something, you can't really enhance it if you don't get information from a lot of different people, so you can't stay stuck on your own view. I've learned that lesson over the years. So yeah.
So Linda, I'm just stepping in because we have 20 minutes till the next session, and everyone is certainly something of a break, kind of 10-15 minutes.
Okay, I did really. I thought I was on the hour. Sorry.
Yes.
So, okay, let me finish this real quick. So you're not going to share your insights. It's a journey, not a destination. So what are the steps? Self-awareness. Then you notice you're stressed. You ask your question, what is the stressor? And then where's it coming from? Is it coming from any of these three things? And then you have antidotes that you can try. And then you get into self-management. And when we get into self-management, we have transformation. So if you have questions, I'm going to post this class. You can email me if you want to know a coupon code. I'll get you a type coupon, and I'll get it posted hopefully tomorrow. So anyway, thank you. I'm so sorry. I really thought I was on the hour.
So lovely. Thank you so much, Linda. And just to let everyone know that we are at 20 to 8 UK time. In 20 minutes, the next three sessions start, and that's Brian Lawrence, Dancing with Your Inner Wolves, Sue Blair, Goldilocks and the 8 Cognitive Processes, with Vicky Giovanna, Ambiversion Factual Fallacy. So I'm going to stop recording now.